Yo, what up guys, it's DENDY and welcome to this new video. It's been a while. Recently I've been focused more on music production grind, delivering tracks and remixes, and since many of you seem to like and download my remixes from Hyped or SoundCloud, I figured that I could show you a little insight, deliver some different content than just uploading remixes and tracks on YouTube. In this video I want to focus on one particular topic, mixing. I'm definitely not someone who can tell you every little mixing secret there is. I will just show you how I approach mixing and some of the tricks and rules that I've been focusing on when mixing tracks. So yeah, let's not make the intro too long and let's hop into the project. So here we are in the project of my remix on Day and Night by Kid Cudi. If you haven't heard it, I can play you a little snippet. It sounds something like this. Yeah, that's about it. If you like it, you can go play the full version of the remix on my YouTube channel or on SoundCloud. It's a free download as well, so if you're a DJ and you want to play this out, hop on SoundCloud, you can download it for free. Yeah, let's get into the topic, which is mixing for today's video. And the reason I picked this project is simply because, as you can see, I'll show you around the project. It's really not big of a project. It's really simple remix, but in my opinion it sounds quite good and quite clean. It's really good example for explaining how I approach my mixing. So first thing first, I want to point out from the start that there are types of producers who do the mixing at once in separate sessions. How I learned to produce is doing, I would say, 80 or 90% of the stuff on the run while I am producing. There are some people who like to get the idea down first or get the structure right. Once they have it done, they start to mix things and polish sounds. But yeah, I do almost everything on the run. That is just how I'm used to work. So yeah, I have a few rules in terms of mixing, or they are not rules, but it's the way I'm used to work. There are a few things that I think are essential. Number one, I would say, is the sound selection. If you work with poor quality sounds, bad presets, bad quality, it will be much harder for you to get a clean mix down, and you won't need to get into the crazy effects and sound processing and stuff like that. So using good quality sounds will make your life much easier in terms of mixing. The second thing, after a good sound selection, keeping it simple. I used to watch all these tutorials where people have a ton of layers on one sound. For example, you're making a lead from 10 or 15 different sounds. But I learned over time that you don't need to have 10, 15, 20 layers of a sound for that sound to be full or be fat. For this example, I went to this particular remix with this video because, as you can see when I open the mixer, it's really simple. I mean, I hardly even used up 30 channels. If I go through several mixer channels, you'll be able to see that I really didn't do much processing or some crazy processing. It's really simple stuff. But I will get to the mixer part later, and I want to talk about the third essential for my mixing style, which is leveling. Because setting up your volumes right is basically the 80 or sometimes even 90% of your mix down. And if you set your levels right, even if you don't know how to use these crazy sound processing techniques, you will get off just fine. For conclusion, three most essential parts for me in terms of mixing: good sound selection, don't overthink layering, and good leveling. Now let's get to the topic of how to begin with leveling and what is important. I always start with the kick and bass, which is, in my opinion, two most essential things in dance music in general. For me, I found really helpful to get the right level of the kick first. Let me show you. I always try to keep my kick the loudest element of the whole mix, set everything around the kick, if that makes sense. When I start to produce a track, the first thing I'll do is get my kick into the mixer and set the level of the kick to -6 dB. So as you can see, it peaks just a little bit above the -6 dB, and I always set the mono in here, and this is basically fundamental of how I start to mix the track. Then I will usually go for find the right sound for bass. So yeah, let's go to the bass. So my bass sounds like this. I'll play with the kick. Here I have the automation for the cutoff filter, but that's not what I want to talk. That's not important right now. What is important right now is to know if you are going to work with the bass as a whole or you're gonna have a separate sub. When you have a separate sub, like I do in this project, let me show you. This is my separate sub. And for the sub, I always use 3x oscillator, which is a fruity stock plugin, and it's basically a simple sine wave, and that's, in my opinion, the most basic and the cleanest sub you can get. And in terms of processing the sub, I really didn't do much. I try to keep the sub as clean as possible, so I only did some saturation with Wave Shaper and Camel Crusher on British Clean preset, and I basically only use the compressor feature. In this case I added a little bit of tube distortion, as you can see, but that's basically it. After that I just threw an EQ in there and cut the really low frequencies, and I cut the highs of the sub, because with the sub bass you don't need high frequencies. In this case I cut it on 119 Hz. As well as the kick, I make my sub bass completely mono, because stereo subs may be causing you some troubles, and it's better if you have it on mono. I'm not good at explaining the really deep stuff about sounds, but yeah, you should always keep your sub bass on mono. And yeah, this was the scenario with using a separate sub. Then when I go to mid bass only, it's a serum sound that I made myself. It's a really simple rolling bass. As you'll be probably able to hear, it has no low end at all. That is because I cut the low end here. And in terms of processing of the mid bass, the same thing as I do for every sound, where I saturate the sound, then compress it a bit. Then I have OTT. I never use multiband compressor on sub bass, by the way. So I have, on this mid bass, I have OTT, which is multiband compression, and then simple EQ. As you can see, I rolled off the sub bass because we don't need it with this sound, because we have a separate sub. If you don't have a separate sub, you will be cutting the bass somewhere around 20 to 25 Hz. But yeah, for now, you can leave it right there. And when you have only one bass, you will also need to make sure the low end is in mono. And when I'm working with the one single bass that is covering the sub as well, I always throw in an ozone imager. It's ozone imager, and I create a band. Depends on the sound. With the band, I usually go between 100 Hz and 150. I take the band to mono. Even if you're using one bass for the sub and the mid bass as well, always make sure to mono the frequencies below 100 or 150 and keep it mono. Okay, then in terms of the volumes of the sub and mid bass, if you don't have a sub in your studio, I don't have a sub, so I usually don't hear the sub frequencies very well. I keep on the master this VST, which is frequency analyzer. As you can see, it's showing you the frequencies of the sound in real time. I always try to solo the sub and see it on the frequency analyzer. And then I slowly bring the mid bass in until it sounds decent to me. I usually set the sub around -21 or even -18 dB somewhere. And that depends on the track once again. But yeah, it's just my cheat code. I try to keep my sub like between -21 and -18 dB. Now, when it comes to leveling the other sounds in the mix, for example, these hi-hats, as you can see, I have these 3 hi-hats, then I have top loop, which I chopped up a bit, and here I have closed hi-hats. Now, these all other elements just depends on your ears. I usually go by my ear, but I am as well trying to reference through the span. There is one cheat code I'm using as well, or it's not a cheat code, but it seems to be working for me. Is when I play the full track like this. You can see that the sub is the loudest element in here, which is absolutely fine in dance music. But then the high end, watch the high end. Here I don't have that present high end, but it seems to be working in this track. I have tracks where I have high end on the exact same level or around the same level as the peak of the sub. But yeah, the high end anyway should never go much above the peak of the sub. It seems to be working for me, for my mixes. If you have the levels set right, your high end should never go above the peak of the sub. Now it's maybe time to show you how I process my sounds, and again I get to the point where I can say one more time that the sound selection is very important, because the more quality sounds you are using, the less you have to do in terms of processing of the sounds if you don't want to go into some crazy sound design stuff. When I select my sounds, I am usually setting the levels in this like sample menu or something as I'm producing on the go, basically. So I get the levels here and then keep producing. I don't need anything else, just the volume to be right. And then I have plenty of samples, for example, these crashes and uplifters, downlifters, sweeps. I have not set the volume in mixer at all. I set it before when I was producing with this volume control of the sample. And then the final step is just cut the lows, basically, so it won't clash with the bass. And to go on, For most of the sounds I have just EQ because I have set the level. It's just the EQ, I don't need to do anything else with this. If I'm not going for some particular sound or sound design thing. But yeah, as you can see, no crazy EQs, just the cutting lows and a bit of highs maybe, and that's basically it. And when I decide to process some sounds, as you have been able to see with the sub bass, for example, I have the saturation here, some Camel Crusher on British Clean preset with compression only basically, and then EQ. And for the lead, as you can see, I used exactly the same. Saturation with Wave Shaper, Camel Crusher, British Clean preset, and here I used only compressor, and then some EQ. So basically it's saturation, compression, here I have OTT, which is another compression, just multiband, and then EQ, where I'm cutting the lows, and another EQ, removing some frequencies, harsh frequencies, or just in general polishing the sound. And the rest is just Endless Smile, which I'm using as a sort of reverb sometimes. And in this case, I have plucky lead, so I used soft clipper to clip this a bit. It cuts off the peaks of the sound and is helping me to get the volume right. For example, with this lead, I decided to not go higher than -18 dB. For some leads, I even go for the -9 dB. Depends on the track and depends on what I hear. But yeah, I never go with any another sound above the -6 dB mark. Whether it's mid bass or lead or Reese bass or any of the rest of the samples, I always keep my kick at -6 and every other sound is below that -6. And there is one more thing I can show you regarding the drums and the hi-hats. If I layer hi-hats or some stuff, I can show you on this example. What I do when I layer hi-hats basically is that I choose one hi-hat, which is the main, and the other hi-hats I open this sample menu, and as you can see I have this panned to the left and the other one is panned to the right a bit, and this one, which I chose to be my main hi-hat, is in the middle. So that is how you create the space for all of the hi-hats and it's sounding more full and the hi-hats doesn't clash with each other. Same goes for claps. As you can see, this is panned to the right, this is panned to the left, and as a main element I chose here the clap from this top loop. Give this a priority and the other one is just layers. Without, with. I have these closed hats here. And as you can hear, it is sort of like bouncing. And this is thanks to this LFO tool plugin, which is basically what I'm using for sidechain, but it's not going completely, it's not completely ducking the sound. And it creates these nice velocity jumps and it makes the hi-hat more bouncy. If I turn this off, you can hear the difference. It really helps to bounce the whole track a bit more. And yeah, basically all the other stuff is just levels set in the production process and then just the EQ cutting lows. And that's basically it. Very simple, but very effective. And next, or the last thing I can go over is the vocal.
Day and night, I toss and turn, I keep stressing my mind.
Without effects, it sounds like this.
day and night. I toss and turn, I keep stressing my mind.
And what I did in terms of effects here is, again, saturation, multiband compression, and then EQ. And of course, with vocals, you need to go for reverb and delay to get the vocal into the space or make the vocals sit right in the mix. And the final tip from this video, because I think I went over everything, if you are using a bus to sidechain like me, but vocals don't go to the sidechain, I have a separate sidechain for the vocals. You usually don't need that hard sidechain as you use for the sub or the bass. Usually don't need to go that hard sidechaining with the vocal. So yeah, as you can see, the LFO tool is keeping the vocal a bit up. It's not ducking all the way down. That's because you always cut the lows on the vocals, so it won't clash with the sub bass or mid bass. You usually don't need to duck the vocal all the way down as you do with the sub. And by doing this, you can simply just make the vocal more present in the mix and more noticeable in the drop where the bass and the kick is going full blast. So yeah, that was a little final tip. And I think this is how we approach mixing. Straightforward and very simple. So yeah, this was the video of me explaining how I approach mixing and some things that I tend to stick to, some rules. Yeah, basically me doing my mixing routines. So I hope you like this video, I hope you understand something, hope you learn something maybe. And even though I'm not the best person to go to learn music production and mixing, at least I showed you how I do it. I showed you what is working for me as well. Let me know what you want me to cover next. Today I went over mixing. Next time I can show you my mastering session. So yeah, comment down below, subscribe, like the video. If you don't like the video, dislike the video. It's all fine. And yeah, until next time.